Hello from Tampa and welcome to this episode of Weapons and Warfare. For Straight Arrow News, I'm your host, Ryan Robertson. We are here for Special Operations Forces Week, or as it's more commonly known, SOF Week 2024. Starting with next week's episode, we're going to be breaking down all the latest happenings from the Special Operations Forces community. We're talking to the leadership, we're talking about new weapons tech, and everything in between, so make sure you stay tuned for that. On tap for this week's episode, though, the state of shipbuilding in the United States and where some industry leaders think it needs to go. Plus, we have an update for you on the new Marine Corps' heavy lifting champ in our Weapon of the Week, and an update on the rising tensions in the South China Sea. But first, let's go ahead and get started with some headlines you may have missed. 2 years to the day after an initial meeting between what would become the Ukraine Defense Contact Group and American leadership, that same group met to iron out details of America's long-term $6 billion military aid package. After the deal was worked out, many wondered what happens now. During a briefing at the Pentagon following that meeting, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin laid out a two-pronged plan of action.
On that first track, we pushed especially hard today to rush in more air defense systems and interceptors. And on the second, this contact group is working with Ukraine to help it move toward a robust, efficient, and self-reliant defense industry.
According to President Biden, shipments of aid began within hours of that meeting, but the delivery of equipment will take much longer. That's because rather than drawing from American stockpiles, this agreement means weapons and supplies will be contracted directly with industry suppliers. The hope is that will establish a long-term solution to Ukraine's needs. This is video of a recent parade held for North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Instead of tanks or armored personnel carriers, the parade featured tractors pulling rocket launchers and launchers hidden inside vehicles designed to look like civilian grain or dump trucks.
It is part and parcel for how North Korea operates. You know, they are an incredibly poor country that focuses the vast majority of their economy on its military abilities.
Matt Shoemaker is a former intelligence officer with the U.S. military. He says because of sanctions, North Korea has limited access to create the military hardware they want. So they often rely on dual-use technology to scare the West. So should the West be scared? Perhaps, but not necessarily because of these weapons. Shoemaker is quick to point out North Korea has a history of hyping up its weapons tech, only for the West to discover the hype exceeded reality.
And finally, if you love acronyms and autonomous vehicles, this is the story for you. This is the DARPA Racer. DARPA, of course, is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, and RACER is the Robotic Autonomy in Complex Environments with Resiliency program. Recently, this 12-ton robotic tank was put through Experiment 4 testing. Built on the Textron M5 platform, the Racer was put through the paces on a 15-square-mile patch of land with a host of natural obstacles like trees, rocks, and creek crossings. Here's a look and listen at what's happening in the cockpit of an early Racer mock-up. Ultimately, this version of the Racer may never see any action, but the information learned will no doubt end up in whatever UGVs, that's unmanned ground vehicles, end up being used in combat. In April, social media posts out of China pointed to a potential major step for the Chinese People's Liberation Army Navy. If these images are accurate, their newest aircraft carrier is set to begin sea trials, putting the Fujian closer to operational status. It's a development that no doubt has the attention of American military leadership, not only because of the growing threat from China, but the U.S.'s current shortcomings when it comes to its own maritime forces. In February, retired Marine Corps Major Jeffrey Seavey wrote a piece for the U.S. Naval Institute titled, "The U.S. Must Improve Its Shipbuilding Capacity."
The central theme of that article was this line: "The United States does not have the shipyard capacity to build new ships and fully maintain or repair ships that it currently holds in inventory. Given current shipyard capacity, the Navy is estimated to be 20 years behind in maintenance work." It's a subject that received considerable attention at this year's Sea Airspace 2024 Symposium.
Shipbuilding is a key challenge for this decade. It's really our generational challenge for those of us now in this business to set the stage. And this is a pretty daunting task. The vector is pretty clear.
But it's not just military leadership that is sounding a cause for concern. It's an issue their commercial partners are all too familiar with.
If we look at the world today with what the situation is in the Red Sea with the Houthi rebels, a potential conflict in the Pacific, obviously what's going on in Ukraine with Russia, there's significant risks that are in the world today.
Naval defense supplier Fairbanks Morse Defense started working with the Navy more than a century ago. And while that relationship remains healthy, CEO George Whittier says getting the government and their civilian partners on the same page is the first step in solving the country's current shipbuilding deficiencies.
The challenge I think that we are facing as an industry is that the demand signals coming and the budgetary process are not matching the rhetoric and dialogue and discussion that's out there. And so as an industry, we need to say, what are the things we can do to try to get increased demand that's out there to provide more commonality for us for the future.
According to statistics from the United Nations, the U.S. and China are on equal footing when it comes to economic output. Where the U.S. is falling short is shipbuilding, and not just to China, but South Korea and Japan as well.
There is no single smoking gun or easy fix to any of this, but it's all a part of transparent, ruthless pursuit of improving performance there in a measured, very measured, fact-based data way.
So what's the solution? According to Whittier, part of the answer can be found away from the coasts.
The biggest labor constraints are at the shipyards themselves. And the reason for that is they tend to be the dominant employer in their area, and that makes a lot of sense. However, if you think about the Midwest of the U.S. where we operate, we again have about 1,500 employees. We are not labor constrained, and there is a tremendous opportunity to take work out of the shipyards and bring that into the Midwest and start to get more work done.
It's an idea that carries some historical weight. A major part of America's expansion westward was a 2,300-mile natural resource that still exists today.
I don't think we're utilizing the Mississippi River at all. The Mississippi River is a gem, and we're just not using it. I mean, St. Louis is one of the biggest cities in the country, and there's doing no work for the Navy. I mean, it's right there. Right? There's labor available in the Midwest. We just have to be smarter about how we apply it.
And just as important as the how is the when. Because if the time comes, America likely can't afford to not be on the starting line when the gun sounds.
Serving you clarity through context, our mission at SAN is to deliver the news straight down the middle. We're different from mainstream media because we spotlight distorted headlines and show you how to do it too. Discover stories that right and left-leaning outlets are choosing not to cover by using our Media Mist tool. Download the SAN app and turn on notifications to have straight facts delivered right to your phone or tablet, and get straight facts anytime at SAN.com.
Time now for our weapon of the week, and check out this beast of a helicopter. We were already planning to spotlight the Sikorsky CH-53K King Stallion when a link to this video came across our desk. Talk about multitasking. This Marine Corps crew is merely refueling while transporting an F-35 to a Navy unit in New Jersey. That is really impressive.
And really, that just begins to scratch the surface on the latest version of a platform that's been in use since 1966. From the Sea Stallion to the Super Stallion to now the King Stallion, the CH-53 is as dependable as it is versatile.
The King Stallion's primary user is the U.S. Marine Corps, and right now there are 14 in the fleet, with another 79 contracted to be built.
While it may look similar to its predecessor, the King Stallion is saddled with some significant upgrades. The 3 engines are capable of generating 7,500 horsepower, giving the platform 3 times the lift capability of the previous version. It also comes equipped with composite rotor blades and a wider cabin. As for its performance, according to the program manager, Marine Colonel Kate Flieger, the King Stallion is already showing what it's capable of in the hands of Marine pilots.
The CH-53K was called upon to lift a downed H-60 in Bishop, California, right on the border with Nevada, that had gone down up in the mountains. Just for some context, that aircraft, the H-60, weighed 15,000 pounds and was up at an altitude of, elevation of 12,000, right? So extremely high. And extremely heavy. And the 53K is the only aircraft in the DoD inventory that could make that lift.
One of the reasons why it can make lifts like that is its construction. Parts that used to be made of metal are now, at least in part, made of composite materials that are as strong as metal, but considerably lighter. Another nod to technology can be found in the all-glass cockpit, a feature that puts it on par with most other aircraft being produced today. With a top speed of 230 miles per hour, the King Stallion can carry a sling load of 27,000 pounds for more than 100 miles. Of course, all of this does not come cheap. With a price tag of $122 million, the CH-53K costs as much as an F-35. But with an estimated 50 years of life expectancy, Uncle Sam should get plenty of bang for the buck. For our comms check this week for you folks, we have an update to a story we first told you about back in March, when a Chinese ship was caught on camera acting extremely aggressively towards a ship from the Philippine Coast Guard. Well, it's happened again, but this time there was a reporter on board that Philippine ship. This is video shot by reporter Nicholas Smith of the Daily Telegraph. Smith was aboard a Philippine Coast Guard ship near the disputed Scarborough Shoal in the South China Sea when a ship from China's Coast Guard pulled alongside and turned on its water cannons.
The water cannon was coming down very fiercely for at least 5 minutes. We had to rush inside the boat. We took shelter inside a little corridor.
It's a situation that's becoming all too common inside the Philippines' 200-mile exclusive economic zone.
They don't hesitate to use brute force to violate international law, to show the international community that they are really going to blatantly disregard UNCLOS.
For the uninitiated, UNCLOS is the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea, and for the past decade, China has claimed much of the disputed area as its own, a claim that was rejected by an international tribunal. If you're wondering why China would continue to press the issue, the Scarborough Shoal offers some prime fishing and, perhaps more importantly, is close to some major shipping lanes used by several countries. So, what happens next? That really is the million-dollar question right now, so stay tuned.
All opinions expressed in this segment are solely the opinions of the contributors.
All right, folks, we are just about out of time for this episode of Weapons and Warfare, but before we say adieu, I just want to take a beat and highlight what I think is one of the greatest displays of leadership we've seen in quite some time. So this past week, the U.S. Air Force and Lockheed Martin announced that the Secretary of the Air Force, 75-year-old Frank Kendall, had taken a ride in the cockpit of an F-16. Now, Secretary Kendall is not a fighter pilot, and you don't see a lot of service branch secretaries taking rides in fighter jets anyway. So from the get-go, the situation is already a little unusual. But what pumps the cool factor in this story to 11 is the fact that not only was Kendall not piloting the F-16, nobody was. Nobody. But the jet did have a pilot, an artificial intelligence pilot. The jet in question is the X-62 Vista, which we've talked about before. It's a special Air Force jet fighter used to test new technology. Kendall's flight wasn't the first time an AI agent flew the plane. but Kendall is definitely the most high-ranking military or government official to put their trust and their life in the hands of this still developing technology. Now, I'm not a pilot, but the pilots I do talk to say building trust in your wingman is not an easy process. And there has been plenty of trepidation about humans pairing up with fighters flown by computers. So the fact the Secretary of the Air Force, who again is not a fighter pilot himself, was willing to prove his trust in the technology in such a headline-catching way speaks volumes. Kendall did not tell pilots they should believe him. He didn't make an outlandish promise that could never be fulfilled. He didn't delegate the task to a subordinate. Frank Kendall showed those he leads what leadership really is, by leading from the front. To all current and future leaders who want to get the buy-in of those around him, pay attention to Secretary Kendall. You might learn something. And that's going to do it for us this week on Weapons and Warfare. But make sure you stay tuned over the next couple of weeks/months, because folks, we have all sorts of great content coming your way very soon. But in the meantime, for senior producer Brett Baker, video editor Brian Spencer, and graphic designer Dakota Patillo, I'm Ryan Robertson with Straight Arrow News, signing off.